Hello, this is Chris Grimes, your host for the Good Listening To show. Very exciting news. Today is National Treasure Day coming up here in the Good Listening To show clearing. We've got none other than children's author Michael Rosen. Hurrah! But this is part one of two. Part two will be either next week or the week after. Listen out for that. Before we do that, though, quick announcement. There is a brand new website, delighted to tell you, also for the Good Listening To show at www.thegoodlisteningtoshow.com. If you'd like to be my guest too, to reach a broad global audience, and we can record as a LinkedIn Live or as a Facebook Live when we do so, have a look at the various series strands on the goodlisteningtoshow.com website, and that will give you a really clear idea of how you can get involved to be my guest too. The series strands include brand strand founder stories. So if you'd like to share your business, your services, or talk about what you do and bring it and introduce it to a large audience and be really clear about where they can go to find you, then brand strand founder stories is the series strand for you. There's also one called Legacy Life Reflections, whereby you can gift the structure of the podcast with its unique storytelling construct to someone near, dear, or close to you as a private podcast to record their story for posterity. Anyway, there are 5 series strands in all. Have a look on the goodlisteningtoshow.com website. And incoming for National Treasure, Michael Rosen, here in the clearing. Part 1 of 2. Enjoy. Welcome to another episode of the Good Listening To show, your life and times with me, Chris Grimes, the storytelling show that features The Clearing, where all good questions come to get asked and all good stories come to be told, and where all my guests have 2 things in common. They're all creative individuals and all with an interesting story to tell. There are some lovely storytelling metaphors, a clearing, a tree, a juicy storytelling exercise called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, some alchemy, some gold, a cheeky bit of Shakespeare, and a cake. So it's all to play for. So yes, welcome to the Good Listening To show, your life and times with me, Chris Grimes. Are you sitting comfortably? Then we shall begin. Oh, yes, indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to National Treasure Day here in the Good Listening To show clearing. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome the incomparable, the legendary Mr. Chocolate Cake himself. Michael Rosen is in the clearing.
Hello. Thank you very much for having me here in the clearing.
Thank you.
Custard Land. It's lovely.
Yes, and you're a meme as well. My son just told me 10 minutes ago, oh yeah, don't forget to mention the meme. So
do you want me to do the thing that is the meme to begin the show?
Let's do it.
The meme goes something like this. Oh, nice. There you go. That is the meme.
And that has gone completely viral global. And it was from your film about chocolate cake, is my assumption.
Not quite. It's actually about a scene round my dinner table at home. We're sitting around eating, and my brother's blowing on the potato because it's a bit hot, till it's cool, just cool, into the mouth. Nice. And there's my mum doing the same, till it's cool, just cool, into the mouth. Nice. But my dad, what does he do? He stuffs a great big chunk of potato into his mouth, and that really does it. His eyes pop out. He blows, he puffs, he yells, he bobs his head up and down. He even spits bits of potato onto the plate. Sorry about this. And then he turns to us and says, "Watch out, everybody. The potato's really hot." Well, we knew that, didn't we? But he didn't. Anyway, that little bit, nice, has become a meme. I am known throughout the world as the nice guy, and even in China, I'm known as Nice Grandpa, because Chinese people are very respectful, very, very respectful towards old geezers like me. In fact, they don't call us old geezers, they call us Grandpa. So if you are an old geezer like me, they come up to you in the street and say Grandpa, but because of the nice meme, I am Nice Grandpa, or in Mandarin, if there are any Mandarin speakers out there, nice, yeah. I'm going to get a T-shirt. Nice, yeah. Why not?
And isn't that extraordinary? Of all the extraordinary works that you've done, 140 books to your name, 55 million views on YouTube with your wonderful channel.
Oh no, I can beat that. We're now 132 million views. Oh, yeah.
Gordon Bennett. So
we shatter that record. Yeah.
Wonderful. And also, by the way, I have here in my hand a piece, not a piece of paper, but a book. This is yours, called Centrally Heated Knickers, that you signed to my daughter Lily. And this book is circa 2000, I think. But here's a book that you signed earlier.
And it's got a poem in it that goes, I glide as I ride in my boogie-woogie buggy, take the corners wide, just see me drive. I'm an easy, speedy baby doing the baby buggy jive. Yes, I'm in and out the shops. I'm the one that never stops. I'm the one that feels the beat of the wheels, all that air in my hair. I streak down the street between the feet that I meet. I streak down the street between the feet that I meet. No one can catch my boogie-woogie buggy. No one's got the pace. I rule this place. And there's a bit more.
Well, thus proving that you wrote it, because that was an extraordinary memory call just straight off the bat there. We didn't talk about this before, so thank you very much for already giving us Alchemy and Gold in the form of a poem from Michael Rosen. So yes, just a tiny bit more Happy Smoke. You are the incomparable. You're a children's author. I know you know this, but I've just got to blow a bit of Happy Smoke because I'm also pulling you into the UK health radio space, by the way, as well, which goes global. So you're the children's author, poet, presenter, political columnist. I know you do a monthly open letter to the Minister of Education about the state of education because of your passion for helping children and the power of language, all that shebang. You're a political activist. I've already said how many books you've written, and congratulations. I thought it's 55 million hits, but it's not. It's
132 million. Yes, I think so. That's right. Yes. And I think it's more books than that. I think now there are books with my name on coming to something like 200. So I can't keep up with myself.
And by the way, I can't talk to you without saying that it's so wonderful to still have you here after your absolutely biblical sort of sucking into the vortex of surviving the COVID coma. So I'm hoping, and I'm assuming you will be talking about that too. But a couple of years ago, I know you're 3 years out now, but I got in touch with you initially, and it's been a really happy, slow burn. But I got in touch because I was really struck with the analogy that was so obvious that you indeed picked up on anyway in your own book about getting better. I thought, obviously we're going on a bear hunt is one of the most seminal books of all my children's childhoods. And just the analogy of the fact you didn't half go through it because, my gosh, all my giddy goo johns, you had the most extraordinary time, which has given you, well, it's been extraordinary. So I'm just so delighted that you're still with us.
Thank you. Yes, I did try very hard to die, and they wouldn't let me. Yes, they put me in an induced coma. It's quite hard to say, isn't it? In an induced coma for 40 days. So it was biblical. Yes, that's right. 40 days and 40 nights. You may have noticed I'm not Jesus. Jesus was Jewish, and so am I. But that's where the coincidence ends, where the similarity ends. And but a bit like Noah, I always think. You remember it was raining for 40 days and 40 nights for Noah. But I didn't have an ark. I just had a bed. And also I wasn't allowed to be there with my wife. I think Noah was in the ark with his wife. I've never found out what Noah's wife was called other than Mrs. Noah. But anyway, there you go. And there were no animals there either. Lots of incredibly nice nurses who wrote a diary for me so I can find out what it was like when I was in a coma by reading the diary.
And by the way, I've seen many a clip which has moved me and my family to tears where you're thanking the nurses for what they did during that period. It was just an extraordinary time in everybody's history, but for you personally, talking about going through it. And indeed, your book, Getting Better, Life Lessons on Going Under, Getting Over It, and Getting Through It, has been a very profound piece of work for us all.
Thank you. Yes, and in many different kinds of love, that book, I was able to put extracts from the nurse's diary. In fact, people quite often say that's more interesting than what I wrote about it, which I sort of take as a compliment as it happens, because yes. It's just so incredible to see working people, nurses, talking about their work, what they're doing to make sure that I'm comfortable and I'm breathing properly and my blood pressure's okay, and thinking about their job. And there it is, laid out in this diary. And I've put long extracts from these, and they're very, very moving in many different kinds of love. That's the book that came before Getting Better. Yeah.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
And in researching you, by the way, I've just been watching the Goldsmiths Writers' Centre film where you were talking about specifically the Getting Better book. And I was really struck when you were talking about the fact there's a whole, obviously a 40-day, 14-day chunk in your life that you've got no words for. And yet now you've subsequently been able to write something incredibly profound and helpful to help others through trauma.
Well, I hope so. I mean, only the other day, I was on some form of chat about intensive care, that sort of thing, because that's what it's called, in case people don't know. You're in intensive care and then they put you into a coma. Some people, anyway. It's the sort of extreme last-ditch attempt to keep people alive.
Yes.
And it's very, very disturbing because they're basically filling you full of drugs to make you go to sleep. And if in the case of, with me, I was ventilated or intubated, so you've got to imagine a tube, here we are, look, I'll take a bottle, a tube going down my throat like that. So I'm lying in bed with this plastic tube going down my throat where they're pumping air into it. And the thing is that they have to give you paralyzing drugs as well. So you have two sets of powerful drugs putting you to sleep, and that's for the induced coma, and then to paralyze you so you don't pull the tube out, because that's what they're worried about. So when you come off this coma, some people suffer very traumatic feelings, images, senses, hallucinations, delirium, all sorts of, we have all sorts of words to describe this. I was fairly lucky in the sense that mostly I got just quite strange dreams rather than terrifying or damaging ones. And I was talking about this, and a man rang in on the Q&A section of this talk, and he said that he couldn't distinguish between when he was in the coma and coming out of it. He didn't know sort of properly that he had actually come out of it. So there's just one example that I've heard of others, of people lying in bed thinking that they were being strangled by the clock at the end of the bed.
Yes.
I remember my dad not being in a full coma, but receiving quite some heavy sedation. And he kept going on about this giant fly above his head. And in the end, the only way in which I could sort of quieten him down really was to say, it's okay, Father, I've got rid of it, like that. But I mean, I hadn't, because it wasn't there. So, the good thing about this stuff is they put you to sleep and it saves some people's lives, many people's lives. And the downside is that your life may be saved, but you may have a form of post-traumatic stress disorder. So I'm sort of trying to address those kinds of things, as well as some other traumas and bereavements and so on in my life, as well as those, to help people address those. Yeah.
And you described there the dreamscape. Does the coma pull you into sort of a dreamscape and a different reality, or are you just completely unaware and catatonic for that period, or do you not know?
The actual period of the coma, I've got no memories, apart from at one point I think I had a sense that I know that I did. I had gloves, mittens, and that was to stop me pulling at the tracheostomy, because after they took the tube out, there we go, we'll do the mime again. After they took the tube out, they put a tube into my throat here to pump air in there. So that's called a trache or a tracheostomy. And I just remember having mittens on my hand and complaining to the nurse, saying, Nurse, why have I got these mittens? And she was Chinese nurse, and she came over and she said, relax, save your energy. And I just remember the way she said it, save your energy. And I remember lying in bed saying that to myself. So I think I was still fairly sedated while that was going on. I can remember also the image of a nurse coming up, and I thought she had like a medieval helmet on. Now, I guess she just had her PPE on. At least I'm guessing so. But I thought that she had one of those visors, they're called, medieval armor. And she had this sheet in front of her face and little slits for the eyes. And I think those are two images that come from probably the end as I was coming out of the coma. But that's about it, really. The other 38 days, 39 days or whatever, they're all gone.
I was also struck with another thing I read or you said about the fact the doctor about to put you under at the beginning of may we sedate you, because they do ask for your permission, and you asking the question about will I wake up again?
That's right. He said, will you sign this piece of paper to let us put you to sleep? And I said, will I wake up? And he said, you've got a 50-50 chance. And then I remember saying, and if I don't sign the piece of paper? And he said, 0. And I think he meant, there's 0 chance of you surviving. And so I signed the paper, which was a good move, though I found out later, tragically and sadly, that 42% of the patients in my intensive care ward did die. So when he said 50-50, he wasn't far off.
And what are your energy levels like now? I'm aware, sort of Googling around about you, you're very prolific still. You're off all over the place. You're back on stage. You're just turning up. You're doing this sort of thing. So how's morale and what are your energy levels now?
Energy levels very good. I walked across the park today to get to my office where we are now. That's about 1.67 miles. I did that in about 30 minutes. So it's not terribly fast, but, it's not bad. I think it's 1.7, 1.8, something like that. Anyway, so I managed that inside 30 minutes. So I was belting along, at least I thought I was. I get a bit creaky in my legs. I can't quite explain it really, but it's sort of, my legs sometimes feel a bit ancient. And then I've lost most of the sight in my left eye, and I've lost most of the hearing in my ear. I have to say that very carefully because I quite often end up saying I really can't hear with this eye and I can't see with this with this ear. And I remember a kid at one school where I said that. She said, "Yeah, well, you wouldn't, would you?" And I thought, that's very good, actually. Well done, very quick, she was. Just a little girl. She said, "Well, you wouldn't, would you?" And I went, "Oh, no, I can't hear. I can't see. I can't see with my ear. No, neither can you." Yeah. So, so that happened because I had microbleeds in my brain. So COVID is a complicated illness that can affect the blood vessels as well as the lungs. So I got microbleeds in my brain as well as blood clots in my lungs. So there we are. I got the full whammy.
Wow. And what is so wonderful to observe is that it has not affected your mental capacity in any shape or form. I've seen you speak about the fact it's just affected your hearing and your sight on your left side.
Yeah, but you haven't done a test of me remembering names. Now, you see, I'm going to remember your name. You're Chris, and your surname is Grimes. So I've done quite well. Chris Grimes. I remember mine.
Michael Rosen knows my name. Sorry.
Exactly. I can remember my wife's name. But I was talking to someone who I've known for years and years and years. I had to do a little interview on camera, and I said, and it's wonderful to be here with... It just went. I could remember Charlotte... Then I remembered the Charlotte, and the first thing I thought the film star Charlotte Rampling, because her name's got an ing on the end. And I just got stuck, and we had to do a retake while I, very embarrassingly, had to ask this woman's name. There's a guy at work. Now, see whether I can remember his name. Yeah, there you go. His name is Francis Gilbert, where I work at Goldsmiths. And I always think that his name is the name of that writer, the guy who did the screenplay for the Cray Brothers movie, Philip Ridley. Yeah. So I always think his name is Philip Ridley, but his name is Francis Gilbert. So when I see him, I go, there's Philip Ridley. No, it's not Philip Ridley. It's Francis Gilbert. So there's another one. So you can test me at some point in this, suddenly snap out a thing and say, who wrote Great Expectations? And if I say William Shakespeare, you see, I've got it wrong. I'll get that one. That's Charles Dickens. But you can try me with some names, and I really...
Technically, I did test you because I whipped out a book you weren't expecting to see, and then you immediately whistled off a poem.
Yes.
So yes. I think you're doing very well. Thank you. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to the Good Listening To Show, Stories of Distinction and Genius. You'll see how you're fitting right in with everything I'm trying to achieve here. And so we're going to talk about clearing a tree, that we're going to shake your tree, see which storytelling apples fall out. There'll be some alchemy, some gold, a couple of random squirrels, a golden baton and a cake. There's also a bell for if we go down any rabbit holes. Cashier number 3, please. So I'll curate you through it. It takes about 45, 50 minutes. Hopefully you'll feel happy and exhilarated and even more awesome on the other way out. So
sounds wonderful.
So let's get cracking then. What is a clearing for the great great children's author that is Mr. Michael Rosen. Have you written plays as well? I'm sure you have. You must have done.
I have, yes. I have written several. Yes, that's right.
That wasn't a test. That was me testing myself.
Indeed. Well, one of them is where you are right now. Here, I mean, you're not. You're in custard land, but I'm in my office here in a place called the Chocolate Factory.
Oh,
it doesn't actually make chocolate anymore. It stopped making chocolate, I think, in the 1950s, but it got converted into offices. And I'll tell you what, we can do a little bit of live telly here. I can move the camera around. Whoops, it's all lots of things connected.
By the way,
here.
You'll make a wonderful Willy Wonka if you're about to show me around an old chocolate factory.
Well, exactly. So you can see some piles of boxes there.
Yes.
And then over here you can see some books. And then down there you can see an alleyway. And that alleyway, you might see some funny grey handles. Well, those are those windy things for shelves, because I've got a few thousand books down there. And so this is my office. And then here's my desk. And you can see that's very, very untidy. And it's got some very treasured things on it, which I can walk you around at any point if you want to. Sort of all sorts of treasures of one sort or another. So there we are. So this is my space. So this is my clearing, and this is where I do a lot of my writing.
And how long have you had that ex-Chocolate Factory wonderful clearing?
Well, I had another one in another bit of the Chocolate Factory from about 2012, and then they moved me out because they were doing renovations into this one. So you could say I've been in the Chocolate Factory since 2012 and been in this room for about 6 of those years, 6 or 7, I think. Yeah.
Do you know what's perfect about that? Put the right wig on you. You would be a living spit of Gene Wilder in all his chocolate.
Yes, well, we share a cultural origin. Gene Wilder was Jewish. So, I suppose with a bit of an effort, smooth my face out a bit and a bit more sort of poking. There we are. I could do a little bit of Willy Wonka. There you go. Hi, I'm Gene Wilder. Hi, I'm Gene Wilder, and I'm playing Willy Wonka. And Roald Dahl didn't like me playing Willy Wonka. He disliked me playing it so much, he took his name off the movie.
Crikey. Yes, he did. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love the fact you've also got your own archive, but you're a living archive in the sense having concertinaed shelving with your books means you've got a crop load of books in there.
Yes. And there's some big cupboards down there. And in fact, in a box there that's sitting over there are my very first writings. I sort of pulled them out of various other bits and put them in a special box, because sometimes people say to me, what's the first poem you wrote? I haven't got that one, by the way, but I've got the third poem I wrote. And I've also got my teenage diary I can see from here. And there's a little special box. So, yes, it is an archive. I would just leave the frame and show you the box.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for this tour.
And here's the box. And then when I was a pretentious teenager, I bought myself, or possibly my dad bought it for me, actually.
Look at that.
This was my notebook for writing poems in. And there you can see from a distance is my third ever poem. And it's called Moth. And it's rather like, I won't say it's plagiarism, it's rather like D.H. Lawrence's poem, Man and Bat. He also wrote a poem called Bat, another one called Snake. So I thought I'd write a poem called Moth. And my poem, Moth, is about a moth that comes into the room, and very like D.H. Lawrence's Bat. That's there. And in there is also my teenage diary, and I think the first story I ever wrote, which went into a newspaper, a newspaper's children's annual. So there we are.
And how come the question on everyone's lips and mine is, where's poem number 1 and 2, please? Is
right.
that because that book is...
Poem number 1 went into a class magazine, and I didn't keep a copy of it. All I can remember is one line from it. Please hang on to your seats now, because this line is so exciting that, cameras will shake, mountains will crack, rivers will dry up. Here it is. And now the train is slowing down. That's it, guys. That's it. You got that incredible line from
Although
Michael
you're
Rosen's
borrowing from a
first
bit
poem.
of, you're borrowing from a bit of not you plagiarising, but that sounds a bit sort of prelude-esque, a bit T.S. Eliot-y, going for a bit of conciseness
It
there.
is, with a little dash, possibly, of a sort of reverse form of Robert Louis Stevenson's poem, Faster Than Fairies, Faster Than Witches, the train speeding along that Robert Louis Stevenson did. And I suppose I thought I'd write a poem about a train that was slowing down instead of speeding along. So that was poem 1. And poem 2, actually, yes, there was another poem. On one occasion, I may have this one actually. On one occasion, our English teacher was leaving the room. And as he was leaving the room, some kid put his hand up. This was what we would now call year 7. And he said, "Oh, sir, you haven't set us homework." Whereupon we all jumped on him and said, "Shut up, for God's sake, be quiet." And Mr. Brown, who was a lovely bloke, and I could tell a whole story about Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown put his head back round the door and he said, "Okay, homework, write a Robin Hood ballad." And he left the room. And we weren't doing ballads and we weren't doing Robin Hood. I didn't know what a Robin Hood ballad was. So I went home, and both my parents were teachers, and Mum said to me, well, she came in from primary school teaching, and she said, "Oh, Michael, what's your homework?" She was always very solicitous, always asking me how I was and what I was doing, you see. And I said, "Mum, I've got to write a Robin Hood ballad." And she said, "Oh, that's nice." I said, "I don't know what to do, Mum." And she said, "Oh, that's all right, I'll help you." And so we sat down and wrote a Robin Hood ballad. So that was poem 2. Poem 3 wasn't Moth, I've just remembered. Poem 3 was our teacher, Miss Grant, was doing a lovely unit on what are called dramatic monologues. They're really like Shakespeare soliloquies, but there are poems that are like that. And the one that I love most of all is the one that begins, "That's My Last Duchess," which is by Robert Browning. And it's a very kind of sick sort of poem, because you realise halfway through or 3/4 of the way through the poem that the man speaking, who is a duke, he was married to a duchess, has probably done her in. And you just slowly realise this, and it's kind of disgusting. "I gave orders," he says, and you go, "What kind of orders?" Oof. So it's a really chilling poem, and I got quite grabbed by that. And Miss Grant said, a bit like Mr. Brown said, "Homework, write a dramatic monologue." And so I went home and I wrote a dramatic monologue, and I think you'll find it in Harrowweald County Grammar School magazine of about 1958 or 59, possibly 59, and it's in there. So that's poem 3, and poem 4 is Moth, which may have got into the school magazine as well. So there we are. So I think probably we've got certainly 2 of them, if we could find those, and I think the Robin Hood ballad is somewhere over there in a pile of my old exercise books.
I was going to give you an extra 1,000,000 points, no cash attached, if you could go to your archive and whip out the school magazine that you're talking about that has your poem number 2 or 3 in it.
That would take a bit of time. I don't know where to look.
We won't do that then. Okay, so we're in the clearing then. Thank you for that. It's beautifully positioned where you're completely at home in your own sort of poetic, alchemic place, where your alchemy and gold takes place within your. It's so appropriate, by the way, that it's an ex-chocolate factory because of your chocolate cake. Yes, my son and his a whole generation of kids just adore your chocolate cake. So
I think at one point the people who ran this factory took over the people who made licorice all sorts. And I do rather like licorice all sorts. So I think not only was this place pumping out chocolates, but also pumping out licorice all sorts. I'd have to check on the history, but it's what I read, at least at one point. Yeah. So
Gene Wilder / Bertie Bassett is what we're talking now.
Yeah, I think they did. They took over Bertie Bassett. I always think his name's Percy Bassett, but it isn't, is it? No,
well, you're doing very well on all the names you've been tested on so far. So you're doing really well. Okay, so we're in your clearing. Now I'm going to arrive a bit Waiting for Godot-esque existentially with a tree to shake your tree to see which storytelling apples fall out. How do you like these apples? So this is where you've been kind enough now to have given your responses to 5 minutes to have thought about 4 things that have shaped you, Michael Rosen, 3 things that inspire you, and so on. So, but I'll curate you through it. First of all, 4 things that have shaped you, and please feel free to go as deep as you like, wherever you like.
Well, 3 of them are very easy. One's called Mum, one's called Dad, and one's called my brother Brian. So we'll walk through, I'll come back to them in a minute. And the fourth one, well, I think I'm going to go back to Barry Brown. Barry Brown, remember, was the man who said, write a Robin Hood ballad. Anyway, going back, so there we are. Those are the four. Now let's go back over mum and dad. So mum and dad, they came, my father was born in America, my mother in London. They were brought up in London's East End from a Jewish background. And so their first language, or the language they were surrounded with when they were young, is not English, it was Yiddish, which is a Germanic language, which is a Germanic dialect, if you like, with bits of Hebrew, Slavonic, Polish, all sorts of words in it, bits of Hebrew in it. So that was the language that was their first language. And when I was being brought up, they used to mix English and Yiddish. They were both great storytellers in their own way, both loved poetry and stories. My father was an English teacher at a secondary school, my mum a primary school teacher. And my brother, I think he thought that I didn't have enough parents. He thought two wasn't enough. And so he thought he'd be the third parent. And so it was quite strange, really. Anything he learnt at school, he thought he had to teach me. So our bedroom, which we shared, it was like a classroom. So now there's a bit of a problem with this because he's 4 years older than me. Very, very clever. So clever that at secondary school, he missed out a year. They pushed him up from year 1, that's what we used to call it, but year 7 we'll call it now. He missed out year 8 altogether. He went straight from year 7 to year 9. So by the time I was like, well, what should we say, 10, he was doing stuff that 15 and 16-year-olds were doing. So can you imagine? I'm lying in bed and he'd go, right, Nick, that's what he'd call me, time for calculus. And then I promise you, he would try to teach me calculus. Now, the thing is, you've got two cars, Mick, and they're both accelerating. But one of them's accelerating faster than the other one. Like that. How could you tell the difference in their rates of acceleration? And I'd go, I don't know. I don't want to know. I don't know. Listen, Mick, listen. What you have to do is have to decide whether you're going to differentiate or integrate. What did this mean? And then he'd start gabbling away in letters. He'd go, d2y by d2x over d2y by d2x. Now, what are you going to integrate, and differentiate? I had no idea what he was on about. That was one half of him. But the other half of my brother is that he was a stand-up comedian. He actually used to do he turned the bedroom into like stand-up comedy. So he used to perform quite often what were really skits and take-offs and impressions of my mum and dad. So my dad, he would have different ways of speaking, lots of different ways, actually. So if he was telling you off, he'd go, never let me see you doing that again. So my brother, he'd sit up in bed going, never let me see you doing that again. Or my dad, if he wanted you to be quiet, you see, he didn't say quiet. He didn't use the Yiddish word, which is stumm, that some people know, as in keep stumm. But stumm, stumm. He didn't say that. In order for us to be quiet, my dad used to go like this. The noise. That's all he did, just like that. The noise. So my brother, we'd be mucking around in the bedroom having pillow fights. Way! In the middle of it all, my brother would go, the noise. You see? So it was like stand-up comedy in the bedroom, and he would read me things. Some people may know the Molesworth books, Down with School and Whiz for Atoms by Geoffrey Willens, and beautiful, wonderful, terrific pictures by Ronald Searle. And my brother used to perform these books for me. Quite seriously, he just used to perform them. He'd stand up and read them, and then we'd pore over the pictures and say, oh, that teacher, drawn by Ronald Searle, he's like Barry Brown. Oh, that one is like Mr. Holt. That one's like, and we'd do that, you see. So on the one hand, there was my brother being teacher.
And he was obviously very infectious in that regard to how you perform your poetry, because you absolutely animate it in the most extraordinarily compelling way, particularly for a whole whatever the collective term, assembly is the word I was looking for.
Yeah, well, you could mix assembly and squadron, so you would have a squadron, or you could have a syndron, an acedron. Yeah, why not?
I was going to say ascendron, obviously.
Yeah, come on, let's have a whole ascendron.
UK Health Radio. the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
Well, it is. It's nicked partly from my brother and partly from a very inspiring teacher. There's another one, actually, called Sean McAlane, a wonderful Irish deputy head at a school called Princess Frederica. He also taught me how to perform. I remember once I had a very strange illness called hypothyroidism that made me very sluggish and slow and inactive. And he invited me to his school. And I think he thought from the poems that I was some sort of live wire. But at that point, I was so slow and so sluggish, and my speech was so slurred that he got me in front of the school. In fact, he opened the door of his office. And I really wasn't ready for this. The whole school was there because his little office, it opened out onto the whole school. He opened the door and said, "Boys and girls, it's Michael Rosen." And they all went, "Hurrah!" And I tried to hide behind my book because I was a bit shy in those days, or a little bit anyway. And I kind of went, and then he said, "And now Michael Rosen is going to read a poem, or perform a poem." And I kind of hid behind the book and I went, "The ship in the docks at the end of the trip, the man on board's the captain of the ship. The name of the man was old Ben Brown, who played the ukulele with his trousers down like this." And then I looked across at Mr. McAlane and he was horrified. There was a look on his face. It was like, and do you know what he did? He went, "No, it doesn't go like that, does it, boys and girls?" Imagine that in a very strong West of Ireland accent. "No, it doesn't go like that, does it, boys and girls?" He took the book out of my hand and then he danced the poem. He went, "The ship in the docks at the end of the trip. The man on board is the captain of the ship. The name of the man is old Ben Brown, and he played the ukulele with his trousers down." And the whole school joined in. The whole school. I remember thinking, oh.
And were you thinking I would have done that if I didn't have hypothyroidism?
Yeah, and of course, my speech was slurred as well. So I was, "Oh, that's how you do it, is it?" I've heard recordings of me. It's like that.
Wow.
Oh,
So how old were you when that was happening to you?
Sort of from about 20 to 30. For those 10 years, possibly more, sort of 20 to 31, something like that. And
I've got confused in my timeline there because you said this was happening at school and that teacher and about reading.
it wasn't my school. It was a school I was visiting.
Sorry.
I wasn't. Yeah, sorry. I did. Yeah, that's right. It was a school I was visiting because I'd already published a book, you see, a book or two.
By the way, that's our other connection, the Thyroid Trust. Not that I've got thyroidism, but Lorraine Williams, who was the sort of director of the trust. I know you are a patron of that of the Thyroid Trust, aren't you?
I am, and if only someone had spotted it, if dear Mr. Sean McAlane had. So anyway, so that was, my brother was an inspiration there. So I've gone off onto Sean McAlane. So and we haven't mentioned Barry Brown. So that was my fourth choice. So yeah. Barry Brown was, if you imagine, I went to a secondary school called Harrowweald County Grammar School, went there in 1957. Now, grammar schools in the late 50s, they were quite musty. You know, our uniform was grey. Mm-hmm. You know, there weren't many lights on in the school, and some of the teachers wore gowns. And some of them, you know, some of them were born in about 1900. You know, yeah, that's right, 1957. They'd only be in their late 50s. We had some teachers who were born in the 19th century. Just thinking, yeah, Miss Drury, I think. Yeah, I can remember her. She was.
How appropriate your first poem was. Your third or fourth poem was "The Moth," because it sounds a bit mothbally.
Well, exactly. Apart from Barry Brown, suddenly into the middle of this slightly musty place. Think of the desks. You know, those old desks with lids. You know, with ink stains, and somebody had scrawled on it. You know, "Jack loves Mary." You know, one of these things, and. You had little ink wells because it was still dip pens just at the very beginning when I went to school. And so the place smelt of ink, and the ceilings were covered with the fact that kids used to eat the blotting paper, chew it up, and then put it on the end of a ruler, stick the ruler in the edge of the desk and go, "Bang!" And the blotting paper used to hit on the wall. And some people even devised a way of taking the foil that used to come in cigarette packets and they'd make it so that it was like a sort of one of those arrows that got a sticky thing on the end, and they'd go pong like that, and it would go poof, and then stick on the ceiling. So the ceiling was covered because it was so high, nobody could get up there to take it off. So it was dotted with blotting paper and things like that. And then we used to even not only, put them in our mouths, we used to pour ink on them and go, and so there were blue ones as well as pink ones up on the ceiling. And it smelt of ink and, of course, old cabbage because of school dinners. So they used to, you had cabbage, 10 days a week. It was extraordinary how much cabbage we used to get through. And the whole school smelt of cabbage and ink. And as I say, the uniform was grey. And when it became evening in winter, they would wait to put the lights on to save electricity. So I used to sit in the gloom while a teacher used to screech away on a blackboard. Yeah, blackboards with a chalk. And 19 plus 23, dy by 2x. No, I never got to that. Anyway, into the middle of all this came, Barry Brown. Barry Brown. I don't even know how to say this. This is so extraordinary and embarrassing. He wore suede shoes.
OMG.
Just eat that, guys. Into the middle of this came a guy. We just look what this bloke. And something else. You know what? He had a Manchester accent.
Oh.
In North London. Please. He went to Manchester Grammar School, as he often told us. I went to Manchester Grammar. It was suede shoes and a Manchester accent. Okay. And then he used to do the weirdest of things. Well, sometimes, for example, he would sit, see where I'm slouching like this. He would sit with his feet up on the desk.
It's like Noel Gallagher's popped in to teach you something.
It was incredible. So like that. And then he would just do crazy things. And he decided that we should have a school play. The school play had sort of gone into remission or whatever you say. They weren't doing the school plays. And Barry said, well, we've got to have a school play. And he found this play called Under the Sycamore Tree, which was about ants. And it's quite a well-known play, actually. It's an American play. And it's quite funny. And so we all had to dress up as ants. And I wanted to be in the play. And he said, yeah, no, I'd love you to be in the play, because it was mostly 5th and 6th formers, that's to say year 11th, 12th, 13th in it. But I was so pleaded with him. And I can remember I had to give a little speech where I had to say that I was a sort of a servant of an ambassador. But the word in the dialogue was plenipotentiary. Do you think I could say it when I was 12? I'd go, I am the plenipotentiary. There you go. Let's try again, Michael. Let's try again. I am the plenipotentiary. And then you're taking me through on the syllables. Plenipotentiary. Plenipotentiary. Okay, do it then. I am the plenipotentiary. Anyway, dear old Barry, he helped me with that. And he was lovely. He was very,
what
very...
does plenipotentiary mean? Sorry to...
A plenipotentiary, I think, is an ambassador's envoy.
Of course it is. I knew that. I was testing
somebody who's sent out by the ambassador to go and do stuff. But instead of saying envoy, which I would have managed, and even the French in those days, because I could do French, I would have said, je suis envoy. But instead of that, if that is an envoy, anyway. So that was Barry. And then here's a sad story now. Okay, so I'm on Russell Square Station. This is about 5 or 6 years ago. And as I get off the train, this voice says, it's Michael. And I turn around and there was Barry.
Wow. And
he was in a suit. And we had a little chat and we talked about my dad being an old lefty. And he said, we must meet up. We must meet up. And so we swapped addresses and things like that. And the next thing I heard was that he had died. And so we didn't meet up. And then I was chatting to a friend of mine.
And so just to stop you there, did you look down at was he still wearing suede shoes? Or?
Yeah, I think he was actually, yes. Good point. And a friend of mine, Alan Franks from university, he said there's an obituary of Barry Brown coming up in the Times, where Alan Franks used to work, I think, because Barry Brown has become quite a successful theatre agent. with an enormously fond group of actors who absolutely loved him, that was in his stable. And he knew I had some little jokey stories about Barry, and he asked me to add a kind of addendum to the obituary that they'd done. And so I was able to write an obituary notice or addendum for Barry Brown in the Times. So it was the least I could do.
In fact, now you mentioned Barry Brown, the agent, of course, that makes sense. Of course, one was in Manchester and then suddenly we're in London in an agency for actors. So that, yes, gosh.
So Barry was, the fact that he was, it's hard to describe. Some people are inspiring, not because of specific things they do, but how they are. And I think the thing about Barry was that he sort of showed that if you wanted to be one of these people who likes writing, likes books and that sort of thing, you don't have to do it in this stuffy, grey uniformy way. I sort of knew that via my dad, because my dad was an English teacher and very unconventional, unorthodox sort of a guy. But it's your dad, blah, blah, blah. You know, forget that.
And the way your brother learnt as well, the fact that it was very visual, very on display, very passionate and forthright. That's
right. And Barry he loved reading the books out loud to us. I mean, he wanted to be an actor. I just think I saw him, in fact. Yes, another thing that he did for me was that he was an actor for the Hatch End Players. So Pinner is next to another suburban little kind of sort of villages, suburban villages, engulfed by lots and lots of housing. And there's a place called Hatch End. It's on the line going out of London. And he became an actor for the Hatch End Players. And he was in Merchant of Venice. And he played Bassanio. And he said, would you like to be in Merchant of Venice? And I was 11 or 12. And I said, yeah, you bet, Barry. And he said, yes, you could be one of the Prince of Morocco's slaves. So I thought, great. And I'm ashamed to say this now in the modern world, but I did black up. Okay. So this is, anybody who wants to say Michael Rosen is a racist, well, I try not to be. And perhaps the most racist thing I did was to black up when I was 11 as the Prince of Morocco's slave. I remember every night I used to sponge myself down with this brown foundation all over because I just wore a kind of loincloth. Okay. So every night I used to have to, and one night, apparently, I hadn't really done my belly. I'd done everything else. So I came onto the stage, and the moment I came on, there were these giggles in the audience. And people were laughing because there was this weirdly blacked up boy who was obviously just some local kid with this great big pink belly. And I wasn't quite portly in those days. And apparently I did upstage. I was the laugh of the night. I mean, the Merchant of Venice is not full of laughs. There's a few with a guy called Lancelot who tricks his poor old blind dad. But they're the only laughs in the play, usually, unless you do laugh rather grimly at the end with a laugh at Shylock. And so, of course, the moment I came off, they said, "What do you think you've been doing? You didn't put the makeup." Everybody's laughing at, all that glisters is not gold. When the Prince of Morocco is trying to, find the key, solve the riddle in order to marry Portia. Portia? Yes, I think so. Do I remember?
You're doing very well. More memory tests for yourself. You're doing.
Yes, exactly.
That's fantastic.
And so, but dear old Barry thought this was hysterical. He thought this was so funny. So there we are. There was two reasons. Plenipotentiary. There, look, I can say.
If I may, you've been a veritable pinball machine of name recall. So you're doing.
It's incredible, isn't it? And my pink belly playing the Prince of Morocco's servant or slave, one or the other. Yes, and dear old Barry, who I didn't get to see. Even though we recognised each other.
But at least you did reconnect again, which was lovely.
There was that moment. I sort of somehow feel that is a little moment of joy. Yeah. Nice. Nice,
indeed. Sadly, though, that brings us to the end of part one. No! Of two parts with the wonderful national treasure that is children's poet Michael Rosen, who you've just been listening to. What an extraordinary man. So yes, part two. Tune in next time. Thank you very much indeed. I've been Chris Grimes, but really importantly, that was Michael Rosen. Tune in next week for more stories in the clearing. And good night. You've been listening to the Good Listening To show here on UK Health Radio with me, Chris Grimes. Oh, it's my son.
If you've enjoyed the show, then please do tune in next week to listen to more stories from the clearing.
If you'd like to connect with me on LinkedIn, then please do so. There's also a dedicated Facebook group for the show too. You can contact me about the programme, or if you'd be interested in experiencing some personal impact coaching with me, care of my Level Up Your Impact programme, that's chris@secondcurve.uk. On Twitter and Instagram, it's
@ThatChrisGrimes.
So until next time, from me, Chris Grimes, from UK Health Radio, and from Stan,
To your good health.
and goodbye.